Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am here again today with some Stormlight discussion and sort of review. And today we will be talking about Oathbringer. Well, today, for me, I will be talking about the first part of Oathbringer. However, when you watch this, the video will be split into two. I have copies that are also split into two parts. So there'll be a spoiler marker about halfway through the video, where the part 1 and 2 are separated, but up until the halfway mark, I'm going to be talking spoilers for this first half. It's confusing that it says part 1 on the front, but in this book is part 1 and 2 of Oathbringer, plus the interludes before part 3 would begin in the second book. So that's where we're going up to in the spoiler mark. The last actual chapter we get before the interludes is chapter 57, Passion, where Dalinar talks to Odium. So far I've been enjoying this book a lot. Much like the previous entries, I've not had a hard time with any of them, really. I've been tearing through the pages, probably not as ravenously as I have with a book since reading The Wheel of Time. So that's definitely high praise. And out of the three novels that I have read so far, each split in half, this half on its own, I think, has probably been overall the strongest first half of a book that I've read so far. I did like The Way of Kings' first half probably a bit better than the second book. However, Oathbringer is hitting it on the mark so far. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Dalinar is the one who we get to see the backstory of, and I quite like Dalinar from book 1, even. I did like Kaladin's story, however, I sort of felt like I knew where it was going from the start, and Dalinar's, whilst I do kind of know where it's going, I expect there's going to be some stuff that surprises me there still, surrounding Kadash particularly, and what happened at the Rift, and what is going to happen at the Rift that I don't quite know yet. But I've been really enjoying Dalinar's story because of the perspective I have on the world through the breadth of world building that's already been done over the course of the series so far. And it's probably the right time for us now to be looking at his backstory once we're more familiar with the world and we understand what it means. I think the most intriguing aspect of it to me is probably that we're getting to learn more about the Thrill. At the end of book 2, near the start of book 3, somewhere very, very early on in this, I had the feeling that the Thrill is probably more... No, it was at the end of book 2, so when Adolin and Esh and I had a fight, I had the feeling that the Thrill came from Odium, and that in some way the Thrill was when they're most susceptible to his influence, in a similar way to Ruin in Mistborn. And as I've seen more of the Thrill in Dalinar's flashbacks, that's kind of supporting my theory, although it hasn't been actually said or stated or discovered by any of the characters yet. It's sort of supporting what I'm thinking, especially with the end of Odium saying, "I've been with you all along." That's definitely the Thrill to me. The Thrill is passion, right? And passion seems to be Odium's thing. So the Thrill is conceivably of Odium, and if they lose themselves to it, then he'll be able to influence their actions more. And that's how you end up with White Eyes, Dark Eye Society. Things are actually making sense now. And I'm only connecting these dots as I'm saying it. I don't script my videos. I know a lot of YouTubers do. I do not script. I ramble and I jump around from point to point, and I come to these realizations in the moment with you guys. I mean, I know it's not live, but... Anyway, that initially long ramble is essentially just to say I've really been enjoying this book so far, and unless the second half is worse, which would be very surprising for a Brandon Sanderson book, I'm gonna probably rate this as my highest one of the series so far. There are some things that I haven't liked about it, about specific plot lines, not like large overarching things. There's nothing big that I didn't like, but there's some smaller bits, some smaller plot lines that I wasn't so much of a fan of, but I understand the importance of them in the narrative. mainly the plotline I didn't really enjoy as much in this was actually Kaladin early, and I've liked Kaladin so far, but when he went back to Hearthstone, the way he acted there was fine, and I liked what he was doing, spiraling out from it, going to all the towns around it in Alethi and trying to get them to prepare for the Parshmen to rise up and become Voidbringers. But then he got with a group of Parshmen and started training them up and like teaching them how to survive and kill humans. And I get it, because it's showing us that they're just a struggling, oppressed people, but at the same time you don't help your enemy. And I know your enemy in this case it's tough. Like, I'm not saying you should enslave them, but they should die because they're a host for the Voidbringers. So, like, you can't let them live, and you can't enslave them either, because then they're still a danger. So, there's only one option, really, and if you're going to be fighting against them, then you shouldn't be training them up first, probably. I guess he manages to infiltrate and gain some information, but not a great deal that wasn't already being learned by other characters, to be honest. This felt more like Kaladin doing his own thing, and like it feels like he's constructed a narrative for himself because he wants to avoid his actual duties. And I'm probably not far from the truth there, but it kind of felt like treading water to read for the most part. Other than that, though, I have relatively little negative to say about the rest of the content in part 1 of Oathbringer. There's a bunch of different plot lines for me to cover, so I'll sort of try and do this in a semi-reasonable structure. And let's start off with talking a bit about Urithiru, because at the end of book 2, Urithiru had just been discovered. They teleported there through the Oathgate, and there was this big wide tower that they had to explore and didn't know anything about it. And that's basically how it picks up in book 3. It's a big scary tower, there's lots of dark, weird lines and patterns that don't make sense, and Shallan and Patton are the main force investigating this, alongside Adeline, who kind of accidentally investigates the secrets of Urithiru. Adeline is set by his father Dalinar to investigate Sadeas' death, and a following death which occurs near the start of this book, where a lord that looks similar to him is killed in exactly the same way. I think it was one of Sabariel's or Roin's. No, he might be dead. Aladar's? I don't know. I can't remember. Some other dude was murdered in the exact same way as Sadeas, and we're seeing this through Adelaide's point of view, and he's like, what the fuck's going on? I killed Sadeas, and now there's like a serial killer on the loose. Anyway, Shallan decides to investigate it, basically, and starts chasing down this weird spren, which is kind of like a Mistwraith from Mistborn. Kind of. It has like eyes that are spheres, which it made me think of a Mistborn from Kandra. Kandra. Yeah, Mistwraith, Kandra. Words. English. I don't know if that's a connection that has legitimate standing, and I don't know how much more I'll find out about the Midnight Mother anytime soon, because she's sort of fucked off for now. But it felt like a Mistwraith, the way it was described. And she chases this weird thing down anyway. It turns out to be an evil spren. And it's linked to these weird shadows that keep pulling away, and it leads them to a scary staircase down into nothingness. It takes Shallan a while to track it there. At first, she is looking out for the murders, and she realizes that there are other repeat murders happening. There are normal murders being done, so to speak, and then a day or two later they get copycatted in exactly the same way. And Shallan as Vale, using her team of like Gaz and Vatha, and a couple of others are mentioned, Red, and I can't remember the fourth one that gets mentioned, but she starts like getting them to hang around and look for information so that she can track down different clues towards these double murders that are happening. And she does it sort of around the markets where there's more danger happening, there's more violence, so more chance of her being able to catch a duplicate. She basically acts as Veil a lot during this time, and I guess I'm not really sure what point I'm trying to say, other than that Shallan spends a lot of time not being Shallan. She seems to have some sort of multiple personality disorder, and I know that's kind of just an interpretation of the way her magic works and her illusions, but she definitely takes it deeper than I think that magic necessitates. She has these whole compartmentalized personalities of Veil and Shallan and Radiant. It's problematic. It's mental illness being explored in yet another way by Sanderson, which is something that I find he has done really well in this book and in the previous ones. Kaladin's mental illness, his depression even as a child in book 1 is a very good depiction of depression. And Shallan here, it seems to be a good... I don't know as much about multiple personalities as I do about depression or alcoholism or, other addiction. But it seems to be an honest depiction of that illness, and I do feel for her, and I'm not really sure what the answer is. There might not be one, the same as there isn't an answer for depression or anxiety, but I hope there is, because I don't think it's going to be good for her in the long run to keep up these multiple personalities. Anyway, while she is Veil, she manages to chase down the shadowy figure eventually. They go down into the weird depths. She takes Adeline with her and a bunch of bridgemen as protection, and essentially the shadow creature, the Midnight Mother, I think she's called, Shallan for some reason figured out that this is one of the Unmade, and we've heard the name Unmade mentioned a few times, but no real description of what it was or what they are, other than I think how they were first introduced was as the 9 shadows of Odium's champion. Odium's champion had 9 shadows, and they are the Unmade. And apparently the Midnight Mother is one of the Unmade that has been trapped and hiding at Uruthuru for a long, long time. So that's why she started mimicking people and trying to understand them when people came back to Uruthuru in a very primitive, childlike way almost, just copycatting them to try and understand their motives and their sentience, I think. So Shallan manages to somehow go into the soul of the Midnight Mother, and I think it's not using soul casting. I think it is actually using her light weaving, but it's not clear. For some reason, the Midnight Mother is scared of her power. She thinks that she has the power to imprison it, probably because it's related to shadow and light weaving's related to light. There'll be some weird connection there that'll get explained later and make sense with the information that gets given to us later. I'm sure that's how Brandon likes to write things, I've realised by now. But regardless, she scares the Midnight Mother off, and the shadows leave and retreat the cave. The shadowy figures that were trying to mimic and attack the men who were with Shallan and Adeline and Renarin have retreated as well. Problem solved. No more dark weirdness around the tower. There's a couple of rooms down here as well where they find some other secrets of Uruthuru. There's a huge crystal gemstone pillar that seems to possibly be some sort of giant fabrial all interlinked across Uruthuru, but they haven't figured out how to power it up yet. There was also some side rooms full of books and stuff, but over the years they had all melted into dust basically, so they were just empty rooms full of debris. However, it turns out near to the end of this part, Renarin is able to push like some weird mechanism in the wall and use some form of magic to open a bunch of drawers from these white tiles that were across all the walls of the room. And in each of these drawers is a gemstone of like a weird shape with holes cut in it, made so that it vibrates a certain sound. And those sounds are messages that a Lightweaver could interpret via like pattern. His hums are the same way, the same sort of sounds that those things make, so he understands them. So it's all basically a contrived way of protecting the information, not only from time, but from the wrong people, from people who wouldn't have access to those powers. Though it could be argued that the Fused have access to similar powers, although I don't know if they can affect things in the same way like that. But they do have some of the same powers that Surgebinders have. Maybe they don't have Lightweaving, though, with them being so dark and shadowy and evil. Regardless, by the end of part 1, no one's actually figured out how to work the giant gem pillar yet, and we don't really know what information they actually gain from those caches. But that's pretty much the bottom of Urithuru's secrets so far. Aside from that, there's a bunch of farmland on the circular sort of levels of the tower, like tons of farmland, but it's not in use. It's not currently able to be used because there's no sunlight on the mountain or something. There's weird weather conditions at the place where they are, so like they don't think they can actually grow food there unless they can somehow figure out this giant fabrial, maybe. So we'll see. But yeah, there's no more secrets of Urithruru to discover at the moment, I don't think, although there's probably still a bunch of stuff hidden there that will only get discovered as and when Brandon decides it's necessary over the course of the series, as more Radiants flock to Urithruru, and as more world leaders flock to Urithruru. Before I do move on, I was going to move on to talking about Dalinar's coalition there, but I just want to mention a theory I have on the Unmade, because I think this really has ground, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be right. So, here's my theory at this point. The Unmade are the Heralds. The 9 Heralds that decided to give up their blades and have been living for so long that Yasna thinks they should kill. Dalinar finds out about all this through the Almighty and looking at those visions and reanalyzing shit. The Heralds are suspectedly still alive. At least 9 of the 10 are, because Talanalat, the insane one, who came back muttering words in the previous couple of books, was the one who was left behind. So he was the only one that hasn't been alive on Earth that entire time. Not Earth, on Roshar that entire time. So, where are the other 9? I think they're Unmade. They are what are now known as the Unmade. And it makes sense because Unmade is like, if the Heralds are hated by everyone because they betrayed mankind, right? And if their punishment for that was to be, like, trapped as a spren, like the Midnight Mother, then that would be, like, unmaking them from existence, essentially. It's taking away their humanity. It's unmaking them. But still allowing them sentience to be tortured, I guess? Not sentience, but a mind to be tortured, or a body. I don't know, it's kind of blurry, but I feel like the Unmade are the Heralds, and the Heralds are the Unmade. There's also some confirmation, or lies maybe, from Odium, that Cultivation is the Night Watcher, or the Night Mother, the weird person who gives people curses and boons. Apparently that's Cultivation, but don't know if that's true or not. That's just what Odium says. But yeah, Unmade equals Heralds. And one more thing before I move away from Shalon. Pattern is slowly becoming my favourite part of her chapters. Whenever Pattern's in the room and he just shouts something from the corner, something like, no mating! It just cracks me up. I love this dude. He's just so appropriately inappropriate. Or inappropriately appropriate. I can't tell. It's one of the other. That's how fucked it is, which is very Pattern in its essence. Like, it's perfect. No mating is the new Pattern catchphrase, and it's great. Love it. I mentioned Adeline and Renarin just briefly then, talking about Shallan discovering her through her secrets, and they were there with her. They don't really get up to that much in this first part. Adeline is supposedly investigating the death of Sdeus, but this mostly gets palmed off to Shallan and then ignored in the surface of investigating Uruthura in general. So Sdeus' investigation has gone dry, and Amaram has been appointed the leader of that kingdom, that princedom, whatever it is. So he's definitely going to be causing issues. He tried to cause some issues at the end, but almost got killed by Yasna. Might still. I can't imagine Amaram being a long-term villain. I think he's more a villain that will get wrapped up in the first half of the series, but I don't know how long this series is actually meant to be. Let me know in the comments. How long is the series meant to be? Is there meant to be like 8 books? 10 books? 20 books? Is there a plan? Let me know. That'd be interesting. But yeah, Adeline and Renarin don't really get up to all that much. They're just sort of hanging out. Renarin is learning to be more of a Radiant, and in that sense, like, he seems to have the power of regrowth, I believe, which is healing, I think. Or maybe growth is healing, or maybe both are healing. It's really hard to tell. I'm getting confused with Lift, because I don't really remember a chapter very well, because I didn't like it that much. But I'm getting confused between what her powers are, and if they're shared with Renarin or with Yasna. It's all very unclear at the moment, but hopefully we get more of an idea of what Night Radiants have what powers going forward, because right now in my head it's a giant jumble. Regardless, Renarin can heal other people, we learn, and I think he sees visions of the future, because that would explain how he figured out how to open the wall thing. It's like he saw it in a vision, because he was looking for it beforehand. And it would make sense for a few other reasons as well, because near the beginning, he's been sketchy around Adeline about Sdeus' murder, as if he knows that Adeline killed Sdeus, and I'm guessing he does. I'm guessing he saw it in a vision. But it doesn't go any further than that for now. Maybe it'll get brought up later. Maybe that's why Renarin's powers haven't been fully dived into yet, to try and mask that. Interesting to see how it develops. I really want some Renarin POVs. That's probably, like, the POV character I would really like to see more than anyone else at the moment, Renarin, because I haven't had any of his POV, and I'm really interested in what's going on inside his head, and his conversations with Gliz, his spren. So, other than Renarin, Shallan, and Dalinar, the Night's Radiant also has Yasna, who is back from the dead, and doesn't really explain anything, which is quite annoying. Still not really a big fan of her. She tries to, like, take over Shallan's life again and just assume the position that previously was. Doesn't explain how she's alive. Doesn't explain why she's been away for all this time, other than to say she was beyond and then not. And, like, she's got a load of secrets. So far, I'm struggling to find reasons to like Yasna. Yes, she's smart, but, like, she's white Arja to a T. And that's kind of me in the way, so maybe it's that, because I'm white Arja, I'm very logic. Oh god, I hate Yasna, and I am Yasna. Well, that makes sense, I hate myself. Joking aside, she is pure logic and no emotion, which is really me. And opposites attract, right? So maybe that's why I don't like her. You don't like people who are too much like you. Because they remind you of yourself? I don't know. I think that's about as good of a read as I can give you on Yasna right now, because I feel like if I talk about her for too long, I'll just complain about the annoying things. She has badass moments. I'm yet to come to like her. We'll see what happens once I get more point of views from her. She's only been in one part of one book so far. Other than them, there's only Malata left at the moment, who was revealed in the interlude from Taravangian at the end to actually be part of the diagram. I wasn't sure at first if she was part of diagram or if she was just a Radiant who had come to Taravangian's cause, like she said to, I think, Shallan. I don't know. She had a conversation with one of the Radiants about, and she was like, I'm not Taravangian's, I just came to him because it was easiest. I didn't quite believe it at the time, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt until Taravangian later confirms that she was brought into the diagram and is one of their lower members. But they're the only Radiants so far. There's also Lift, who is in Azir with the new Prime, I think they call him. Gorks. I can't remember his actual name. Gorks is what she calls him. And they're sort of on the way by the end of this part, but for the most part of this book, the Radiants are like 3 or 4 strong and not doing very much. That is also due to Kaladin's inaction, which I talked about a bit earlier, so I won't renege on that. Kaladin eventually goes back and starts doing stuff with the team. But the main goal from Dalinar's perspective in this story, other than the past that we get to see with him interacting with his late wife Evie, and with Gavilar and his children when they're very young, we get to see a lot about his past and his ways of war and conquering. And then in the present day, he is trying to unite people and make a coalition of the world leaders to try and fight the threat of the Everstorm and the Voidbringers and another desolation, which nobody seems to be fucking listening. He's got span reads going everywhere, he's having conversations, we've got Fen, Queen in Thaelena, Taravangian, who actually writes back and comes straight away. Of course he does, he's the diagram, he's trying to control everyone. Azir with Gorks and Lift, they don't listen until the very end, and then they decide they will come to Uruthuru. Same with Fen, he eventually manages to get through to her, but it takes a while. Some of the leaders, I can't remember, from Emul, I think, and then there's some other areas around the map that I can't remember the names of, but a bunch of them basically just said, piss off, we don't want anything to do with you, you're a warlord, we're not letting you near our cities. Understandable, but they're also stupid as fuck. New desolation. Work together. Anyway, I feel like I'm dissing a lot, but I'm not actually hating. I find the people stupid. I'm loving the story. I just find the people within it to be very dumb, which is sometimes true. Like, it's realistic. Not everyone's the brightest. Sometimes it's good for a story. Anyway, Dalinar is originally trying to convince everyone through span read conversations, and it's just not going well at all. Like, nobody wants to listen to him. And he thinks it's because they can't have a proper conversation via a span read, via scribes who aren't actually... It's not like a first-hand experience. And through conversations with the Stormfather, his bonded Spren as a Knight Radiant, he learns that he can bring people into the visions that he was given by the Stormfather through the previous books and replay them at his will, basically, move around and be different people in them if he wants to. So this becomes a whole wealth of information for Dalinar and for Yasna and Navani, who he begins to bring into these visions and allows them to experience it and have a greater academic focus on the meaning behind everything that they can see in that world. He also starts to bring in the rulers as the High Storm hits their lands. That's when the Stormfather can bring them into the vision with Dalinar. so he can have a conversation with them in the middle of the same visions that convinced him that this was the right thing to do. And it's a clever plan, and throughout the first half, we just see it unfolding, basically, with a couple of different examples, with Queen Fen from Thaelena, I think, and we've got in Azir, the young Prime, who was anointed at the end of the last book after Lif, or in the middle of the last book after Lif saved his life. After numerous visits and conversations with both of these, he manages to win them both over and convince them that he's not there to conquer, he's trying to unite and protect. So hopefully in the next part, some allies are going to show up and start assisting. That's exactly what we need. We need more people to spread the word and be like, yeah, no, he's for real. Like, this isn't a piss take. Less Taravangians. Although I do love Taravangian, but like, I hate what he's doing to our characters. But I love Taravangian. He's a sneaky bastard. I hate what he's doing to the characters, but really, he's a sneaky bastard. Okay, 3 times is enough, right? Sneaky bastard. So most of Dalinar's development in this, his emotional character development comes through him reminiscing, or not reminiscing, but reliving the atrocities that he committed in previous era. Not a lot else to say on Dalinar for the moment, other than still really enjoying his character, liking watching him. He does have that conversation with Odium at the end, and Odium says he's been there all along. I've mentioned some things already that came from that conversation. Odium also says that he wouldn't agree to a challenge because he has no reason to, he's going to win anyway. Don't be stupid, basically. And then he starts trying to convince Dalinar to release him. Dalinar essentially is being led to believe that Odium is leading him down the garden path, that he's dangling a carrot in front of his nose and getting him to go exactly where he wants to go. Dalinar believes that, and I think in believing that, he's somehow going to actually do what Odium wants him to do. And obviously, I don't know how it's going to come to a head yet. I don't know if it even will in Oathbringer. But long term, like, whatever Odium's plan appears to be, that's not what his actual plan is, I'm 100% sure of. It's probably the least bold prediction I could make about a series, isn't it? Moving on, I think the last thing I really want to talk about for now, and this has been a quicker first half, so it might be a shorter video overall, we'll see how long I have to ramble in the second half. The last thing I want to mention for now is Bridge 4. We started getting Bridge 4 POVs. What? It's crazy, y'all. I love it. POVs from different members of Bridge 4. We get Scar, we get Teft, we get Moash, we get Rock, we get... I'm not sure who else we get. Sigzil. We get R'lain/Shen. I think those are like the main 6. I can't remember. You might get a tiny bit from Leighton or someone. Anyway, the Bridge 4 chapters are the most wholesome, enjoyable part of this book so far, and I'm really hoping that they continue to be a part of not just the next half of this, but the future novels as well. I want them to have Bridge 4 chapters, please, because Bridge 4 is life. For the first time since picking up Brandon Sanderson's own works, he made me cry. I had genuine tears just dribbling down my face as I was reading, and that was during chapter 41, which is Teft's point of view chapter, where he's suffering from addiction to a drug that is in the world called moss, fire moss. He burns it between his fingers, gets some euphoria, and goes into... It sounds kind of like a mixture between heroin, ketamine, and alcohol, and about as lethal as all 3 combined, probably. At least that's how it's made out to be. But the way that Brandon writes addiction and the character's awareness of their addiction, it really spoke to me. I'm someone who went through years of my life as an alcoholic, dangerously close to the edge, fully aware of it, and it took me a long time aware of it before I got to a place where I am now, where I'm sober. Yeah, I'd been exactly where Teft had been. I've been in the same situation, change a few details, and I felt it, and it felt real to me, and it got me to cry. It was honestly such a beautiful depiction of an illness that is awful to so many. And I don't want to make this a ramble about mental health, but I really appreciated the depth given to Teft here, and the light that it was depicted in from his point of view was just so realistic. I don't know if Brandon has any history of addiction himself, or if he knows people that have. I feel like he must have had some in-depth conversations with people who have suffered from addiction to write that how he did. And not only had in-depth conversations with them, but actually listened to what they were saying. Because a lot of people can interpret it the wrong way when you have those sorts of conversations and not actually hear what you're saying, but hear how their brain interprets your illness. And yeah, I just wanted to shout out that chapter in particular as probably my favourite chapter of Brandon Sanderson's work so far. It's going to be... I mean, it was painful, but it was the most emotionally impacted I've been at any point, and I really just wanted to give Teft a hug and tell him it gets better. Regardless, Teft is not the only one who suffers in Bridge 4. They are the miscreants, the weirdos, the loners and the outsiders, after all, and each one of them has their own little story going on, the thing they're worried about, or that makes them feel alone. Scar at first is struggling to access the Windrunner abilities that a lot of the other Bridge 4 crew are picking up straight away, and he feels like he's gonna be left to one side once they all go off on Radiant Squire adventures. He'll just be left behind with Rock, cooking the stew, and eventually he does get the Radiant powers and turns out to be able to use them pretty well. So that's cool, I'm glad for Scar. But each one of these is basically like a short story about a member of Bridge 4. And the format of it works really well, just interspersed with the rest of the novel, because these are characters that we really fucking love, that the first two books made us really fucking love. Not just for like an act of heroism or a cool thing, but for the people that they are. And we're now finally getting to see the depth of who these people are when they're not just bridgemen running to their death. It is in some ways depraved, but there's so much hope in these men at the same time. Rock is an emotional core for the group. We see how his job isn't just to cultivate a meal. It's to cultivate an environment where these people feel like a family. And he doesn't have his own at first, but they turn up at some point. He managed to get a message to them, and they turn up, and it's really wholesome. It's a beautiful moment. Most of these chapters I really loved. I wasn't too interested in Moash's journey as a slave to the Parshendi. It's trying to mimic bridge duty in book 1 a bit, and like he's trying to mimic Kaladin, and it just feels a bit weird. I'd be okay if Moash died at this point, because he keeps trying to tell himself it's not his fault, and he can't be blamed for what he did and why he's been separated. But it is his fault. I don't know what else to say. Graves was the bad guy who set him up, but like, he still wanted it all. He still does want it all at the end of the day. And he's kind of turned to the Parshendi now, so I think Moash could be a champion for the Voidbringers in some sort of way. But yeah, I'm not too big on Moash's chapters. I don't feel like he is a part of Bridge 4 anymore, so I think it annoys me when I see the Bridge 4 chapter symbol, and then I read Moash. I'm like, this is not Bridge 4. Not anymore. Maybe I'll change my mind on that if he has some sort of redemption, but right now that's how I feel about it. The rest of Bridge 4, Relaine, Scar, Rock, Sigzil, Teft, I've really loved every entry of their stories that I've read, and I found them to be some of the most emotional, captivating chapters of Brandon's work so far. Anyway, I think that's everything I have to say about the first half of Oathbringer. So I will be stopping recording for now and going to start the second half.